Hello, welcome to Code Tech Talk. My name is Carlos Cucalon, and today we're going to talk about forms. And in this video, we're actually going to exercise the knowledge that we found in regards of forms and the different input fields. And we're going to recreate this form right here, this contact us form that I have created as an exercise. Again, all the files that you will need to create this would be found on the description below. They're on GitHub, and if you already subscribed to our GitHub account, go ahead and do that so that you can look and receive updated files that as we're adding them to our repositories. So here we have the contact us form, and let's go ahead and start coding this out. So in our contact us form, what we're going to try to do is create a responsive form that is also ADA accessible so that users with visual disabilities will be able to fill out this form. And then we're also going to focus as far as, again, it has to be responsive, and we're also going to try to be as clear as possible with the names and everything that we have. So we'll just focus on creating this form here. The purpose or the idea of the form is for a user, in case they are reaching out to a business, they need to provide their information, and then the business will give them a call back sometime in the future, maybe like a doctor or somebody like that. If you look at the files that I submitted, you'll be able to see that we have the form CSS, which is where we're going to place everything in for clarity, and so that we can have just a single file without any other content inside of it as we're working through the CSS. I also have an introduction CSS, which is what is actually affecting this field, this form right here. And then I have a style CSS, where if you watch our CSS variables and branding video, that's where we recreated this. This file here. And I also have grid system that I created here for this exercise right here. So if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments below as we're working through this exercise, and please feel free to reach out anytime that we can help with. So let's go ahead and get started with this exercise. So the first thing that we need to do, we need to get contact information from our user. To be able to do that, the first thing that we need to do is create a form. So the form values that we have, again, we're going to use the form tag, the form element right here. And then inside of the form element, you have to provide certain values as it starts handling information and sending data to the database or to the backend script so that it can pull it and send it to the database. Again, I'm just showing you this information on the form tag because it's not something that we're going to fully finish in this section. Maybe it's something that if you encourage me enough, we might create it. But again, in this case, we're just creating the HTML. I just want to show you all the different fields and attributes and properties that you can add to a form. So within the form tag, you would use the method. And then you have two different methods. You have get or post. So get usually sends a string on the top of the browser where it sends every single one of the fields, which is not as secure. You might see that in small applications that you're just trying to get one information to another in the same place. But to be honest, I would say 99% of the time you would use the post method, which actually posts or processes the page and sends it fully to the data to the server-side script so that it can pull the data from the form fields, and either if they're all correct, then push them back to the database and send the user to a thank you page or something like that. If they're incorrect, then it'll send it back to the browser, and it'll tell them, okay, these are the fields that maybe need to be changed or updated, and then the user will go in and actually fix those. But again, we're not going to go through that process right now. We're just kind of showing you guys what are the different attributes and properties that you can set here. So you have the method post, and then you have the action, which it would actually tells you where the form is located, or the server-side script. Again, this can be php.aspx, whatever you have server-side script that handles this. And then, of course, you have the name of your form, which in our case, we're going to call it registration. And this is what you need in order to create or start a form. Okay. Now, the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to make it easier for the users to understand the different sections. So there's this one thing in web design that is called form fatigue, that the more that a user has to fill out, the longer the form it may be, the more that a user more than likely will not finish that form. So when you break it down into smaller chunks, maybe show them, okay, this is information we have. If they were to look at it at a glance, they'll know there's 3 sections. This section is maybe the longest, a little bit smaller, and then here's some information that I can send over. So if they're able to see it, it kind of gives them a relief of knowing from one section to the next. Now, the other thing that we're going to do here with what we're going to add, which is going to be the field set, is going to help, especially for users with disabilities, that they'll know specifically what fields they're looking at or what groupings, and so it makes it a little bit easier also for them to fill out this form. So field set again creates this little square that you see that you've seen in other forms, and kind of this selection right here, and lets them know, okay, these are the form, this is one section, right, this is another section, this is another section. So groupings of different form fields. Inside of the field set, we're going to use a legend, and the legend again is kind of the label that we put on that field set. So for this first one, we're going to do is we're just going to call it information, and we're going to save that, and then this is the default look of that field set right here on the page. Now, since we're going to do this a couple more times, we can just go ahead and copy this over, and then we'll use these others as we're going through the page. So let's go ahead and start setting up our form fields. So the first field that we're going to set up is going to be our first name, and here we want to make it so that you have two different fields within the same first row. So let's go ahead and create the markup, and by that what we're going to do is we're going to create something, a div with a class of form row, which if you know GitHub, or I'm sorry, if you know Bootstrap, or if you've already done something like, for example, what we did on our calc video in using CSS, then you'll see that this is something that we use in order to create a grid system. So you have form row, and that's going to be our rows of information or fields, and then we're going to create groups. So we're going to do a div class of form group, and then here, because I want it to be 6 columns, then I'm going to do call MD6 for our medium size column. And again, this is something that we're going to use from one area to the next. So again, I'm just kind of copying that over so that I can have it saved. And then we're going to create our label. So this is going to be our first label. And then our first label is going to be for first name. And I'll explain this as I finish up writing the input field as well. So we're going to do first name here. And then we're going to do our input field, which will be our type of text, again, because we're entering our first name and we want it to be able to use as many characters, whatever it may be. So we're going to give it an ID of first name. Take into note that this for first name is connected to this ID first name. And then we're going to do a class of form control. This is how we're going to style all of our form fields using this class of form control. And then we're going to give it the name of first name. This name is not related to these 4 attribute here. This one is what the server-side script pulls to be able to get the data from this field and store it in the database. So this name has to match with whatever script you create on the back end to pull the information from the form. The next thing here, we're going to do a placeholder, and we're going to say name, and then we're going to make it required. So let me go ahead and toggle soft wrap so that we can see it in the same page. So let's go ahead and take a look in here. So here we already created a form row. And that form row has inside of it a form group, which the group groups both label and the input field. And then, of course, we're here saying that we want it to be 6 columns wide, so half of the whatever width that we have in. And then here we have the label. So the way that you write the label again is you open the less than sign and put label and then for and then first name. We already talked about it, that this matches your ID first name. And then again, whatever you have the value inside between the label open and close tag is what's going to be the label on your page. And then you have, of course, your input type text, again, because we want to be able to select or allow the user to enter if they have numbers in their name or any special characters, whatever it may be, they have the opportunity to do that. The ID that gets connected to the for attribute in the label. So the label for first name, again, this is where that's coming from. And then you have the class form control name first name. This again is set up so that the server-side script can pull the information from this field and save it in the database. And then the placeholder is this light gray area that you have right here, so that when you start typing, it kind of goes away and it just gives them a hint. Again, you may not want to put the placeholder for name, but again, that's optional. Again, if you remember from what we talked about in the video before, that placeholder does not replace your label. Your form fields, or anytime that you have a form field, you need to have a label that is related to that specific form field, so that if a user with a disability comes into your website, they're able to see and hear the name of that form field, so that they know which form field they're going to be inputting content in. Very, very important. So we're going to do the same. So we have first name, and of course we also have to have a last name. So I'm just going to copy that over and replace this information here. Last name. Again, one of the ways that you can test that your input fields are set up correctly is that if you click on the label itself, it takes you to the input field that it's supposed to be affecting. So you don't have to click on the input field to enter information. You can just click on the label. If you click on the label and it doesn't take you directly inside of the form field so that you can start typing, then there might be something wrong with your the way that you have set up your label and your input field. So now that we've done that, we already have our first name, last name. So let's go ahead and do now our email and phone number. So the next row that we're going to do, again, we have this div class form row. Now the form group, I wanted to expand full width. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do call MD12. And that way we have that in there set up so that it goes full width anytime that we're on the desktop. And then we're going to enter the information for our email. So if you look at the example that I created, or the first video that we created, you can just easily come here and get the input field so that you can copy that over into the new form that we're creating. So here you can do label for, and then email, and then here you can set up email, close the label, and then we already have this ID set up as email. We already have it set up as the placeholder user at email.com. Let's go ahead and make this. We have the input, the first name required, the last name required, and let's go ahead and also do our email address as required. So that way we can request to make sure that these are provided to us as we are working on the form if we need to contact our users. The next one that we're going to do is going to be our phone number. If you remember the video that we talked about where we discussed each one of the input fields, the reason why we use text instead of, say, number for our phone number is because we want to let the users, if they want to style the phone number, they can style it. If they have maybe a plus something, if they're calling us or they want us to call them outside of the United States or whatever it may be, then you can do that as well. We can even set up our maybe how we want them to format their phone number. Maybe we can show them like 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 0. Again, if you do want them, if you want to style the phone number, then that will require, so if a user starts typing in 1 2 3 4 5 6, whatever it may be, then you want it to automatically style, then you have to use JavaScript to do that. This, again, the placeholder is just a little reminder of what type of information you want them to put in there. If you were to look at the index.html within your exercise file, you'll see that I also have this small class form text, which this one is what I'm using as a helper text that can help the user fill out the information on this field. In our case, I just want to let the users, or remind the users, that I would like for them to use the full phone number, including the area code. So please provide your area code. Again, and we're going to style that as well. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to create an address field so that the users can fill this in. For the phone number, I don't want it to be required, so I'm removing the required tag. And I am a big fan of copying and pasting, so I'm going to copy and paste, and we're going to go ahead and do address 1 for our 4, and then change our ID to address 1, name as well as address 1. And then we'll change the input field, the placeholder, we're just going to leave it as address 1. And then, of course, our phone, instead of phone, it'll have to be address 1. And then we're not going to use any helper text in here. So we have that information there. And we're going to copy it in case we have an address too, which might be like a PO box or something like that. Then we're going to change these fields as well, so that they're all connected to each other to address 2. And here, maybe in the placeholder, we can do something like PO box, or maybe like a suite number or something along the lines of that. So we have our first name, last name, email, phone, address 1, address 2. And then we also need we now need our city, state, and zip code. So we're going to use something very similar to what we used up here as far as using our columns. For the other columns, what we've been using is 12 columns, which is what it spans for the full grid system that I have in place. If you have a different grid system, then you can play alongside with this and change the grid system to whatever grid system you're using. In here, I have 2 fields only, so I'm going to create a third field. So the first one is going to be our city, and I'm going to replace the values for 4, ID, name, and the placeholder is going to be city. And I don't want it to be required. I don't necessarily need their city name or state or zip code. But if that's something that you need in your form, then that's definitely something you can do and make it required. So I'm using city, and then here we're going to call it state. And let's go ahead and use the same semantics, since I've been using lowercase for 4 and ID and everything else, and the name for the field itself. Then I'm going to continue using the same. And here I'm going to do something like, for example, Texas, or maybe we can do ST. And here we can use the max length equals to 2, so that we limit the user from entering more than just 2 letters in here. Okay, so we have this. Let's go ahead and change the label value inside of it to be state as well. So now you have city, state, and now we need zip code, and that's what we're going to change here. copy, copy, paste, paste, and then here we're going to do something like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then 4, 3, 2, 1. And again, that's kind of the zip code setup that we have in the United States. If they want to add something like that, they can use that. The ID zip code, and let's go ahead and replace this to zip code. As well as, for example, our city, I want it to be kind of half of the forms, but the other ones I want to divide them in two. So I'm going to use an MD3 and MD3 column D3 for the grid system here, so that it only uses this space and this space here. So we already have our first name, last name, email, phone, address, and here I didn't set up as address 1 for the label, so let's go ahead and replace that here. Address 2, so then with the PO box suite number, and again, if we wanted to, we can just change, instead of saying address 2, we can say something like PO box suite number, etc. Then you have the city name. Again, you have the placeholder city, the name of the state. I put ST in the example that we're working on. Here I put something like TX, and then I put a zip code in there as well. So if we were to save this and refresh the page, then you'll see that we have each one of these input fields. Anytime that I click on the label, then you'll see that that I actually can click on each one of them, and it takes me to the input field that we're working on. We also have a helper text right here that we're going to style as well. So now let's go ahead and move on to our second option, which is, or our second area, which is going to be preference. So let's go ahead and change our legend to preference. Let me scroll up so you can see that a little bit better. And then here we're going to do the same thing that we did over here, but let's go ahead and go back to our input forms and fields page, and let's go ahead and copy the value of these input fields so that we can create the form here where we have these days of the week. They can select which days of the week they prefer to be contacted. So let's go ahead and do that real quick. So as we're typing in here, let's go ahead and, again, we're going to start with a div class of form row, just like kind of what we've done in the past. And the only difference is now we're going to do this form group, div class, form group, and then what the columns are. So for example, in our case, we're going to do call MD6 because we wanted half one side right here, right? And half the other side. And then we can close that div. And we're going to give it a kind of like a title for that section. So we're just going to create an H4, days of the week, H4 right here. And then here we're going to have something very special for anytime that we use checkbox and radio buttons. We're just going to change the markup just a little bit. So we're going to do a div with a class of form check. And then usually you have the input field here, and then you have the label at the end. So that's what we're doing, the input field in the first. So the ID, we're going to name it, say, Monday for our first one. And then we have the form check input, just like what we have here on the example that I provided. And then the name for the server-side script is we're just going to call it day of the week. I'm doing camel casing because I kind of like using camel casing, and that's kind of where you start with the lowercase, and then the next words are all going to be with uppercase. And then for value, we're going to pass on the value of Monday, and then we're going to create the label with a class, of course, of form, and in this case it's going to be check label, and then for the form field called Monday, and then we're going to give it the label of Monday, and then we're going to go ahead and close that label. So we're going to repeat the same information for Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And here again, we're just going to, let's go ahead and do that real quick. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And again, we need to change our form fields because check this out. If we were not to make any changes, if we were to click on Tuesday or Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, each one of these form fields, form labels, are connected to this Monday input field. So if you already know how to do it, go ahead and pause the video and fix up the rest of the form for this area right here so that you can test on your knowledge as far as how the form field is connected to the input field. So I'll pause for a second and we're going to continue and we're going to move through. And we're fixing just all we're doing here is we're just fixing the input fields here and the connection to their labels. Thursday. All right. So now if we refresh this page, then you'll be able to see that each one of these input fields are now connected to the proper labels. And you'll notice that I didn't change the name day of the week. The reason why, again, is because checkboxes allow you to select multiple values. And when it gets submitted to the database, it gets submitted as an array of values. So they'll get something, in this case, if we were to submit the form, they'll say something like Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday as values of day of the week for their selectors. So that's why we're not changing that day of the week there. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to change for time of day. And I'm just going to go ahead and copy all of this. And then I can go ahead and paste it, and then let's go ahead and call it time of day. And here we only have 3 inputs, so let's go ahead and delete these other 3 that we don't need. And then instead of checkbox, it's going to be radio. And then here we're going to call it time of day. We're going to replace the name because we want this to be linked. And let me not change this so that you can see the difference. See, I have on Monday, for example, here that I have on the right hand side. If I were to click, if I were to click on Monday, it's still connected over there. So give me a second, save it. Monday. So we need this to be changed. Give me a second, please. Let's go ahead and change this to morning. And then morning here. So that it connects here. Again, we still need to fix these other ones. So afternoon. Evening. You'll see right here that something odd happened down here. You'll notice that these two are working with each other, but Monday is not. You see that Monday is not connected to this other radio button. So this one, Monday, is going to be sent off as a name of time of day, but day of the week are still connected here for afternoon and evening. That's why having this name is very, very, very important as you're setting up your HTML. So you need to always make sure that if you're using radio buttons, in order to connect them to each other, you use the right name for that input field. So as you see, when we change this to time of day, Now these are all connected to each other here, and then you can select the time of day that you would like to use within your form. So now that we've done this, let's go ahead and take a look, make sure that we have everything that we need within our original form. And this, so the next thing that we need to do is create the third section and final section called preference. And here we're going to add a drop down menu, and then we're going to add also our reason for contact. So in our drop down menu, let's go ahead and create our form setup as well. So we go right underneath preference, the legend, we're going to do the div class of form row. Close that div. And then we're going to create the div class of form group, and then we want them to span the 12 columns, so that's why we use the call MD12. And then we're going to do the div class form group here as well. So I think I have this one too many times. So let's go ahead and now set up our select drop down. So here we're going to do label for, and let's go ahead and call this section right here departments. So department, and select department, and then we're going to close our label. Then we're going to create our select tag here, and of course we're going to give it an ID of department so that the label can get connected to the input field. And then here we have a class of form control, just like what we have in the rest of the fields, and then give it a name of department. And then let's go ahead and close our select tag here. You'll notice that as I'm working on the HTML, I usually close and I open and close tags almost at the same time. The reason why I do that is to make it easier for myself and make sure that I am not missing any fields or any closing tags as I'm working on the application that I'm working on. So that's something that I would highly suggest for you guys to do as you're working on your HTML. Anytime that you open a tag, close the tag. That's another reason why I work on indentation, make sure that everything is indented, because if something was off indentation, then I'll know maybe I'm missing this closing field. I know that Adam actually helps me kind of highlight where the opening and closing is, but again, that's something, another visual reference that can help as you're coding your site. The next thing that we need to do here is we actually need to give options here. So then we're going to give different options, and we're going to give it a value option. And here we have 1, 2, 3, 4 options, and 2, 3, 4. And then we have customer service, technical support, new accounts, and other. So let's go ahead and type that in: customer service, technical support, new accounts, and other. And if you notice, our select tag here doesn't have a value in itself. It has a values within the options. So anytime that you create a select dropdown, you have to provide values for each one of the options that they select. So again, here we're going to call it customer service. Maybe we have a value of technical support. And then we're going to do a value of new accounts, and then other for this one right here. And that should be what we have right here for our dropdown. We have all the different options. And again, if you click on the field, on the label, then it selects the input field right here. The last thing that we need to do is, again, use our text area to create our text area for a reason of contact. And here we're going to go ahead and do the same thing. We're just going to copy the row and how many columns we're going to be using. All right, and we're going to use our text area input, text area, All right, and here we're going to give it an ID of reason, a class of form control, a name of reason, and then we're going to give it a rows of like maybe 5 so that we have 5 lines that we can see. And then as a placeholder, we're going to enter your comment here. Now we are missing using or creating the label for this field right here. So if you want to pause it and create your own label, feel free to go ahead and do that so that you can get some exercise doing that. And we're just going to go ahead and code it. So label for reason is going to be reason for contact. So now we have that, we refresh, and we have reason for contact. Anytime that, again, we keep on clicking on each one of these labels, and they are connected to the right forms. Again, very, very important, especially for disability. You want to have those set up properly. Now, right before the closing of the form, let's go ahead and enter our input fields for submitting the form. And we're also going to do one for resetting the form, although we won't use it, but I just want to show you of why they're there. Okay, so input type submit. And then the value here is going to be submit form. And then if we were to save this, you'll see that whatever value we have here and we save is the value that shows up on the button outside. So that's the value, ID equals submit. And then we're going to give it a class of BTN primary. Again, if you haven't seen the video that we created for CSS variables and branding, then I would recommend you watching that. And then we have name equals to submit. So that way we know in the server side what button they pressed. And then we're going to do the next one, which is going to be the reset. So the type, we're changing the type to reset. And then erase everything. So I'm going to say here. And the ID is going to be reset. And then the name is going to be reset. And then let's go ahead and just secondary for our button, just so that we have some differences here. So hopefully so far you've already have a form where you have 3 different field sets, each one of them with their own proper legend, and then you have different fields or field sections that are set up for each one of these form labels and form contact information that we need from our users. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to actually start adding some styles. So let's go ahead and add some style here. Welcome to Code Talk. My name is So let's go ahead and add some style here. Let's go ahead and we're going to go to the form.css, which is the form that we have here. If you want to test out, make sure that the form is working. I always like to set up the body, background color, red. If I save that, then it changes to red. Then I know that this form is connected to the exercise file that we're working on. So if we were to look at the markup right here, the first thing that we're going to notice is that we have our form row, but let's go ahead and set up our field set first and then our legend. So let's go ahead and type those in. Field set, legend. And for our field set and legend, you'll notice that we didn't use any dots or we didn't use any pound signs because they're not classes. These are actually the tags themselves, the HTML tags for each one of these form elements. So for field set, let's go ahead and remove the border. So we're going to do border 0 none. So the border is gone. Let's go ahead and also add maybe a little bit of padding so that it's not so crunched up. And we're going to do padding, and then we're going to use our variable padding. If you want to know where this is coming from, you'll see that that variable is being set up in our style.css underneath structural variables. And then here we have padding. Right here, line 34. So if we go back, then that's how you set up and use a variable within your CSS. So we're using padding. That way it uses the same variable padding properties or scale throughout the whole site. And then we're going to add some, maybe a little bit of margin, so that there's a little more space between this section here and this section here and this section here. There's a little bit more separation, makes the user a little more comfortable, not everything so crunched up together. And then let's go ahead and give it a background color of, say, let's go ahead and use the light gray that we set up in our style.css. Here again, we have this light gray. If I were to change this to something like EF, and I save, you'll see how it changes colors. Again, we're using the same variable so that it affects more than just one piece at a time and kind of keeps your branding and structure the same throughout, right? So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to affect the legend, and here we're going to also give it a background color. And let's go ahead and do the primary color, but the dark one, primary dark. So we're using that there. Now we cannot read it, so we need to change the color. So let's go ahead and use the white that we have in our color scheme. It looks a little bit cramped up, so let's go ahead and add some padding as well. And then we're going to add some padding right here using padding, so that looks a little bit better. And then let's make the font size a little bit smaller. So let's go ahead and do font size, and then use another one of the variables that we have here on style.css, and is SM font, so which is going to be a smaller font. So we're using that there, saving that, and that changed the font size right there. You'll see that. Save it bigger, save it smaller. All right, and then the next thing we're going to do is let's go ahead and make it uppercase. Text transform uppercase, just to style it up a little bit more. So that's looking a lot closer to what we have here. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to focus on the form row, which is what we have right here. So form row. And in our form row, we want it to kind of move to the margin to the left and to the right at -1 rem. And that's following our same example that we're using for our regular row that we're using in our grid system. You can see that. So I'm pretty much just kind of copying over all of this and pasting it right here on our form row. So again, I'm using margin left -1 rem, margin right -1 rem, display flex, and then he uses a flex flow, row wrap, and again, I'm using the same kind of functions that I have here for my row and my column, my grid system, so that you can take advantage of the grid system that you already created if you already have one. If not, then let me know and I can create a video for our grid system and how to actually recreate this grid system that you see on the screen. So that's what we're going to do. I copied over the form row so you can see margin left and margin right. I gave him a -1 rem. I used the display flex, the flex flow to row wrap, justify content, align items and content, align content to flex start. Again, using flexbox because I love flexbox. And that automatically, if you notice right here, it kind of set it up for us so that it uses each one of these fields right here, and they're aligned next to where they're supposed to be aligned in. Okay, so now we have the form row, we have the field set, and we have the We have the legend. One thing that you will notice right here is that each one of these input fields, the font itself doesn't look the same as the rest of the fonts, and the size of the font is not the same either. So right underneath legend, let's go ahead and standardize that. So let's go ahead and add button, input, up group, select, and text area. And let's make sure that these font family, font size, line height gets inherited here. Font family, inherit. Again, this inherit comes from your body element or whatever element is wrapping around this other element that you're trying to affect. And again, it inherits the font family. If you notice, this font family itself is not coming from our CSS, it's actually coming from the browser. So if we save this, you see how the text is the font family itself changed. Then we can do the same for font size, inherit. We can do the same for line height, inherit. And then let's go ahead and zero out our margin. And now you can see how everything kind of just automatically changed over in this area right here. Okay. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and set up our form group. So if you notice, each one of our form groups, they're all kind of bunched up next to each other, right on top of each other. So let's go ahead and change that. So our form group is going to have a margin bottom of say 1.5 rem. And we save that. That kind of sets it up a little bit more and separates them from one area to the next. And the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to do a form control. And here we want him to, so that the input field occupies as much space as possible. Right now, this input field has a display of inline block. So let's go ahead and change that to block. So we're going to do display block. And now you see that it actually moves right below it. And then we're going to give it a width of 100% so that it grows as much as it possibly can grow. You see that all of them kind of did that. Let's go ahead and save that. Let's go ahead and save that. And you see how each one of these changed. And then the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to add change the border to maybe 1 pixel solid and then kind of like a light gray, lightest gray. We have that there. And then let's change the padding to kind of follow the same padding that we use throughout the rest of the site. And then kind of that adds a little bit more space. And of course, we want the color to be the same as the rest of the page. So we're going to do the same variable called text so that it has the same color as the rest of the page right here. So for the most part, we have everything here set up as far as styles go. Let's go ahead and take a look in here. What else can we do? We have these kind of helper text right here. In that helper text, we're using the class of form text. So let me go ahead and add that here as well. 1 second. Let me just go ahead and add this comment down there so that it can stick to the top. And then we're going to use form text. And for our form text, we're going to do the font size of small font. And that creates a little bit of a smaller font right here. And then the next thing that we need to do is now we need to actually style our labels. So let's go ahead and do our label. And we're going to make them so that they're black. So we're going to use the variable black. Again, we're using the colors from our brand. Font weight, we're going to make them a little bit bolder. And then make sure that they're all inline block. And then we're going to maybe add a little bit of a margin so that there's a little separation between the form label and the form input field itself. REM, so then that has a little bit more separation. Now the next thing that we're going to do is going to be our form check, which is these buttons right here. we're going to change those. So let's go ahead and do form check, and then we're just going to add a little bit of a margin bottom 0.5 rem. That way they have a little bit of separation from one area to the next, or one field to the next. And then I want to style these labels right here that we have for the checkboxes and the radio boxes, because I don't really like whenever the labels for the checkboxes or radio boxes are bolded like that. So I'm going to change those to label.form check label. And then let's do the font weight of 400, so that is normal. And then let's add a little bit separation between the checkbox or the radio button to the label itself. So let's go ahead and do padding left 0.5 rem. And then by doing that, then you notice that it created a little bit of separation from one to the next. All right. Very good. So now we pretty much have everything set up here. There are some pseudo selectors that we're going to use right now to kind of help maybe hide or guide the user, to a better experience. So let's go ahead and do the following. So the first one is going to be our form control focus. So what this does, you'll notice that in some browsers, when you click on it, it kind of highlights the input field that you're working on, and it kind of gives it that blue background or blue highlight around it. Let's go ahead and change that to border color, and then the variable is going to be our primary color. And then we're going to change it to our outline to have the same color, primary color. And of course auto, and then 1 pixel. And then anytime that we click on it, now it has our primary color instead of that light blue color. So we're trying to keep our standard branding throughout the whole form. The next thing we're going to do is our form control required. So if a form field is required, we're just going to use color green. Again, and maybe outline, we're going to do green auto 1 pixel. And again, you can change that if you want to. So again, you have these fields right here. And then if again, control. Now we have them showing up. So if they're required, then they'll be highlighted in green, and that way maybe a user knows that they need to be highlighted. And then if they have, for example, if you have something that is invalid, then you can do form control invalid, and then you can change again your border color, and let's go ahead and change it to black, and then our outline to black as well. And now you know that these form fields are required. So if you have, for example, information in there and you fill it in, it's correct. If it's not, say you move away, then again, it's kind of set as a black. You can set it up as red if you like to. If we were trying to submit this form, again, it will take me to these form fields right here that are saying that it are required, and you're still missing information in order to complete these form fields. But as far as styles go, this is pretty much all the styles that we can set up on a form. In this form, I wanted to show you, if you scroll down to the bottom and you click erase everything, see that we have some values up here. If we click erase everything, then everything will be erased, and then information will be gone. So that's why we don't use it. But again, I wanted to show you in case you wanted to use something like that inside of your field, inside of your form. So in this lesson, what we did is we talked about our HTML markup for forms. We created labels, input fields, text areas, checkboxes, buttons, drop downs, and all of these, they're all kind of connected to each other. I showed you guys on what the form tag itself is, the different fields and inputs that are available for you. We did some basic styling as well. well to our input, our form. And then again, some different kind of pseudo selectors that you can add to your form so that you can view it, right, and maybe identify certain form fields. I'll go ahead and also in the description of the video, I'll add some information and some links to other pseudo selectors that you can add to your form so that you can maybe style a little bit more, and some ideas and references to Bootstrap where I got most of this information from. So if you have any comments, questions, concerns, please feel free to leave them in the comment below, and I'll be able to go ahead and answer that for you guys. If you have any questions, let me know. Again, this is Carlos Cucalon with Code Tech Talk, and until next time, I hope you guys have some fun coding.